I see how you voted on the congestion charge, and I think you gave a pretty clear answer to the government's threats and bribery about you don't get any money if you don't have a congestion charge. And in my view, if you've got good transport schemes to go ahead, you should have that money anyway and make sure you can spend it to help make sure we get traffic moving in Greater Manchester in a way that it should.
You would give us the nearly £3 billion that was promised if you came to power.
If you remember, before the vote even took place, we said it was time to decouple the congestion charge from the Transport Innovation Fund and to allow cities to get hold of that money and to spend it. So where you've got good projects to spend that money should flow and the investment should go in.
And let's talk about the kids on the streets of Greater Manchester who are worrying an awful lot of communities in the way they behave. It's perception, it may be reality or not, that things aren't as good as they used to be, that the streets are an unsafe place for kids of 14 and under. What would your party do to improve things, Mr Cameron?
Well, there are some things you have to do sort of straight away, short-term things, and chief amongst that, I think, is making sure the police are out on our streets and making sure their paperwork is cut. Right now, if you're a police officer in Manchester and you stop someone, not stop and search, just stop someone, you've got to fill in a form that takes you 7 minutes to complete and is about a foot long. I have a copy of it in my desk to remind me of what the police have to put up with. First thing you've got to do is you've got to cut the paperwork, get rid of forms like that, so the police can police the streets effectively. But long term, you've got to ask, well, why are these kids on the streets in the first place? Where did they get the drink from? Who brought them up? What went wrong? And you've got to go right back, in my view, to what happens at home and what happens at school. And the fact is, in terms of, the family is the best anti-crime policy, just as the family is the best welfare policy and the best way of caring for the sick and giving us good values. And so we've got to start with the family and support families more, and I think end this crazy system where our welfare and tax systems actually pay people to separate. I mean, how mad are we as a country? Examples in the papers last week. Couples benefiting by £5,000 a year by separating, not because they didn't love each other anymore, not because they didn't want to bring up their kids together anymore, but because it just paid them to separate. How mad are we to have a country like that?
What about education financially for kids in schools? I don't know how far down you've got very young children, I know, but I'm sure they'll grow up very financially astute. But secondary schools, possibly? Do children need to be taught money management skills?
We do. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that children go to school for a huge period of time, and yet some of the life skills we really need to teach people don't get taught. And if you think about the problems so many of us have got into over self-certified mortgages and buy-to-let mortgages and loan-to-values and borrowing 125% of the value of the house, we should prepare people better for the difficult financial decisions they have to make later in life, and schools are a very good place to do that. The scale of the credit crunch is that big. Our banks and building societies were borrowing from these wholesale money markets and lending that money out. Those wholesale markets are shut. So there's a huge gap. There's a credit crunch. There's a reduction in the money supply. And that's why I said yesterday, sometimes I want to shake the Prime Minister and say, look, what I meant is that this is a credit crunch. It needs a credit answer.
Are you getting frustrated with the Prime Minister?
Sometimes I get frustrated because I'm very frustrated by the VAT cut, because that was a really pointless waste of money.